We're on chapter 20, and this is why I call it the Waits Corner, because this picture was sent by a good rain dog friend of mine from Los Angeles. That's Tom Waits in there. And I'm back. So, still in chapter 20, and we want to talk about multiple ownership of personal property, which doesn't sound very exciting, because it's not, but it's something that you need to know. So when two or more people own something together, we like to say that they have a tenancy. You think of tenants, you think of, well, landlord-tenant, somebody who's renting an apartment or a store or something. True. But this is different type of tenancy. And since it's owned by two or more people, we have names for their type of relationship. And it's very important. It makes a big difference whether what happens when something happens to one of them. So there's three types. Tenancy in common, joint tenancy, also known as joint tenancy with rights of survivorship, and most lawyers and real estate people and some other folks shorten that at the bank to JTWROS, joint tenants with right of survivorship. And the third one is tenancy by the entireties. And tenancy by the entireties refers to only married people. All right, there's a fourth one called community property, but that's in California and other places. We don't have that in Michigan, so why bother learning it? So tenancy in common means that each of them own a piece of it. And we're talking about things that can't be divided. Now, it could be something like a car. You and your friend go in together and buy a car together. You're owning that as tenants in common. Each contributed to it. You may be left in a will with a piece of property, you and your two brothers. All right? So the three of you own this piece of property, which is not divided. So you all own it together, and you kind of own a third of it each. Any of you can sell off your share in that to somebody else, or you can assign it to somebody else. You can leave it by will to somebody else. You need a number of things. But all are there are to share in it. Joint tenants right of survivorship is different. It's still the same. They're both tenants together. But now they have this sort of anti-alienation. Alienation means you can transfer something. Anti-alienation means we don't want you transferring something. And while you can, it doesn't amount to a whole lot. Because when we call it joint tenants with rights of survivorship, it means that when one of them dies, it's now owned by the survivor or survivors of that joint tenancy. So let's go back to the example. You and your two brothers have a piece of land, joint tenants with rights of survivorship. When your first brother passes away, it's not like his family gets a third of it or a piece of it. They get nothing because they're no longer the survivor. So all that's left is you and your other brother now own this together. And if your second brother passes away, you're the survivor. You're the one still alive. You wind up with the whole thing. You are the survivor. And while either of your brothers when they were alive could have tried to transfer their rights in this to somebody else, which they can do, but they can't defeat the survivorship portion of this. So no matter what happens, still the survivor winds up with it. So why would somebody want to buy it from one of your brothers knowing that they could die first or second, but not third, and they wind up with nothing? That's why it doesn't get conveyed very much. This is also used in bank accounts. Some bank accounts are set up between two people, joint tenants with right of survivorship. That means if one of them dies, the other one winds up being the owner of that bank account. The third is tenancy by the entireties. And again, I said that's for married couples. This is not in every state, and it's sort of old-fashioned and may not make it through another century, to say the least. It's under attack. But tenancy by the entirety means that, and this is an odd description, this is what I got. It means that it's owned by the husband and wife together. It's not like it's half his and half hers. They own it together, subject to each of theirs right to own the whole thing when their spouse dies. Not that anybody's wishing for that necessarily. So what this becomes is like joint tenants with right of survivorship, but it's really wrapped up in the tenancy by the entireties. And if they get divorced, it automatically reverts to tenancy in common. Whenever any tenancy is not spelled out as to what it is, It's not spelled out that these two people are married, for example. It reverts to tenants in common. So those are the three tenancies. And do you need to know all the ins and outs of those? No. I just want you to understand what those three differences are. Okay?